Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Backstop. My name is Paulie Jackson,
And I'm Bruce Maxwell.
and welcome to the Backstop. Today we have a wonderful guest amongst us, here to share us a lot of knowledge, a lot of gems, a lot of love, a lot of passion, and just herself with us today. So we're very appreciative to her coming. Genevieve Jones-Wright, here to just share a bunch of stuff. And I just want to first give you your flowers and talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you have brought into this world, and represented yourself very well out here. Genevieve, she's a native San Diegan. She's known in her community as a lawyer, activist, as well as a local leader in the fight for criminal justice, amongst many other things. It's really hard to box that. So she, kind of does it all. Um, she also served at San Diego County as a public defender from 2006 to 2019.
Ms. Jones-Wright. She ran for district attorney in 2018. She's also co-founded and served as an executive director of an impact litigation nonprofit called Community Advocates for Just and Moral Governance, also known as MOGO for short. And one more fact we have about her amazing existence and influence in her community. She also founded a professional motivation speaking firm that encourages, empowers, and enables everyone to live on purpose, called Motivation in Action, MIA for short. Genevieve, welcome and thank you for blessing us today. How are you today?
I am so good. I am very happy to be here, very grateful that you all are taking the time to have this conversation with me. So I'm just honored to be here with the two of you.
Awesome. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And we talked briefly before this on the format, but we're just going to really hop into it. Honestly, please just educate us a little bit on what you've been up to lately in your professional career and what's been going on.
So you talked about how I'm the executive director of MOGO. I'm one of the two co-founders. We were founded by two Black women attorneys, myself and another local Black woman attorney. And the reason why we founded this organization is because we felt that there was a deficit in our region. We're the only impact litigation organization that is Black-led in this region, and we are the only other impact litigation besides the ACLU. And we are fully centered on achieving racial and social justice. And what we do as an impact litigation organization is we initiate lawsuits in order to hold government accountable, but especially to those people who are marginalized, so vulnerable people, so people who are incarcerated, formerly incarcerated people, unsheltered people, Black people, people of color. This is the work that we do. And our work is built on the fact that all of our systems here in America are founded on white supremacy. And so we're trying to dismantle white supremacy through our lawsuits by changing laws, by changing policies and procedures. And so I've been a little busy with the work. We have a few lawsuits. One was just written about in the UT, where we are suing the County of San Diego, namely the sheriff, for not providing safety measures for people who are incarcerated. And obviously during a pandemic, that is very concerning and alarming. And on top of that, without COVID, we had the highest mortality rates of all of the 6 largest counties in California, right here in San Diego. So people were dying, are still dying in our jails at an alarming rate, higher than all of the other large counties in California.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Wow. Wow. It's not, obviously it's not surprising to me. I've jumped into a coalition called the California Abolition Act, about, the 13th Amendment and, abolishing slavery in the text form, from the Constitution. And that is a direct result of, being overworked in prison systems, as a slave, essentially, involuntary solitude. As far as your work involving that, it seems like a lot of your work is, as a Black woman, is something that directly has affected you. How do you feel, and what are some of those points that you're fighting for now that you intrinsically have to look at yourself and says, this has happened to me, this has happened to me, this is happening to me? And what are some of those key things? Because I often have to look at myself and my work and say, wow, like this hurts. This hurts because I've went through this. This hurts because I'm currently going through this mentally and emotionally. What are some of those key things that kind of drive you and just, kind of break you down at times?
So something that I don't talk about a lot, and it's because other folks, who I'm talking about and who I'm referencing, will try to use it against me, right? They'll say she's only engaging in this work because she wants to retaliate or she wants some sort of revenge against the police department. But we're having a lot of conversations around racial profiling and why we need to end racial profiling. In San Diego, we have had study after study showing that Black people are policed differently, that brown people are policed differently, that BIPOC people, which includes Asians and Pacific Islanders, are policed differently. But Black people are stopped at a higher rate than their white counterparts here in San Diego. We are searched at a higher rate than our white counterparts here in San Diego, although we are less likely to actually have illegal items on us. So that means that when white people get stopped, they more likely than not have contraband, illegal items on them, but they're less likely to be searched. Whereas me, as a Black woman here in San Diego, I'm more likely to be stopped and searched for no legitimate reason at all. And so we now have a study that was commissioned by the city of San Diego, where San Diego State University highlighted the disparities in policing. And what our city council did was they said, we appreciate your findings. We're going to approve your findings, but we're not going to do anything with the recommendations that you gave us to actually address the racial profiling that you says happened. Now, then the ACLU, a few years after that, they commissioned a study by Campaign Zero. And the Campaign Zero study said the same thing. Black people, brown people were policed differently, were policed more, were over policed. Then the San Diego Police Department partnered with Center on Policing Equity, and recently their report showed the same thing. I say all this to say that I've been a victim of racial profiling more than once. So the work for me is very personal. It's not personal because I was stopped without a legitimate purpose more than one time by the San Diego Police Department. It's personal because I know that my entire community has been harmed by these unconstitutional practices and acts, and that for all of this over policing, because of it, a lot of community members are traumatized. And so the work that I do recognizes that our police departments, our sheriff departments traumatize and re-traumatize our already hurt communities. They erode trust when they say they want to build it. No one trusts them. And everyone's talking about public safety, but no one's talking about the ability for the public to be safe from rogue police officers or just police officers who are quote unquote doing their job because that's how they were trained, that Black and brown people are suspicious. Right. And so for me, doing the work is the work that has to be done in order for our communities to be looked at as full humans. So I hope that answered your question.
More than enough.
Man, that is something right there. I mean, I have, I'm from military and and my dad always told me when you were talking about Black and brown people being suspicious to the authorities, like my dad told me that I was never allowed to join the military because it's probably the most racist area in America. And I was like, what do you mean? We're in the military. We're fighting for each other. We have women. We have all these different types of people. They were like, even in the military, they favor the white people over people of color. And I was like, how can you do that? Like, how can it happen? And me and Paulie have talked before, and like just how police officers just go about being around people of color just in general. I tell you this right now, just a personal thing. I was in New York the beginning of this year. I was in New York beginning of this year. There's a huge protest going on. Like our hotel where we were staying at is right in the middle of it. Like we have a police station on like both sides of us. And it's like the call center and then the system. I'm walking to go get coffee. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I had 2 cops approach me, trying to vet me, trying to accuse me of being a part of the the resistance, quote unquote. And I just woke up, but just from how I looked, like there's a Starbucks sitting right behind where this protest is supposed to happen. And that's where I was walking to, but just in general. And I mean, like you said, there's more likely to be pulled over. You're more likely to get searched. You're more likely to be made to comply, even though you've done nothing. Okay, you might have been speeding a little bit. Who don't speed? Who doesn't speed? But at the same time, you can put a person of color and a Caucasian person, male or female, don't matter, in the same exact vehicle, doing the same exact thing, and that person of color is going to get pulled over 9 times out of 10. Every time. They could have kids in the car, they could have fruit in the car, they could be donating their whole house in the car to somebody in need, and nobody cares. And everybody thinks that's okay because it doesn't happen to them. But like you said, it's personal because it's happening to people that look like you. And that's the biggest reason why we're doing this, is because we need people from different realms that we all experience the same things to come together and spread a word from different point of views, and to get these eyes open. We need to start loving and learning. We need to start loving and showing empathy, like not just, oh, well, this dude has a criminal record. A lot of people have a criminal record.
Yes.
Doesn't make them bad people. But
absolutely.
And that's, I mean, this is huge. And like what you were talking about with the pullover rate for people of color, for the carceral system, that's completely teetered on a whole nother level when it comes to people of color in general, the overall population inside of prison, and how many prisoners aren't cared for depending on the area that prison is in, and the priority of that governmental side of that area. And it's like you started rolling and I was like, boom, this leads me to my next question. You were a public defender for a very, very, very prominent time. When it comes to being a public defender, from when you started to right now, how much and why do you think it is that public defending is so, like, there's so much stacking against being a public defender, that it's, first of all, people are needed for being public defenders. You have, in some cases, you have public defenders that have hundreds of cases by themselves. Like, why do you think that is? And how do you think we can change that?
So I'm gonna go back to something you were talking about earlier, because you were on a roll, as you often are. And so I want to say a few things before I answer that last question.
Okay.
The first thing that I want to say is, one of my biggest priorities is connecting the dots between what you mentioned about mass incarceration, all of the people that we're just warehousing in our prisons, how that connects with how we are policed in our communities. People need to understand that through over-policing, through the racial profiling, this is how we get so many Black people with criminal records. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're looking at me as if I am a threat, or as if I am a criminal, if I'm some sort of offender just because of the color of my skin, you are going to trap me in the criminal legal system, by all accounts, by all means, right? So it starts off as a stop for something that is something as innocuous as speeding, as you say. And then it becomes a fishing expedition. And then they want to search your car. Then they're asking you if you're a gang member. Then they're asking your passengers. And this is how they start to cast this wide net. And this is where it starts. And so we have to really see that connection between how police officers engage in our communities to the disproportionate sentencings and prosecutions of Black and brown people, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is people don't understand that if we go back and we look at all of these cases where people like Philando Castile was murdered, Sandra Bland murdered, and I'm going to use that murder word. Most of the times when we're having these interactions that should be very simple traffic stops, we end up dead.
Correct.
As Black and brown people, we end up dead. White people, they're not dead at the end of their traffic stops normally. They get a ticket and they can go on about their business. But these traffic stops that they impose upon us, even when it's a pretextual reason, which is, something that the police can engage in. They can say, well, yeah, it's just a license plate light that's out, but I want to stop them because look at what they look like in their cars. Oh, this is just a registration tab that's expired, but I want to pursue the passengers in the car because I believe they may be a part of some sort of criminal street gang or whatever it is. So they use things like these very simple, innocent reasons to then engage in other behaviors, which is what we're trying to stop in San Diego through an ordinance that actually helped to write. We could talk about that later. But the third thing that I want to say is that when these officers are engaging with us in these traffic stops, it's more than just a traffic stop. And we have got to talk about how we get law enforcement out of the business of enforcing traffic stops. Mm-hmm. These are the conversations we have to have. So Bruce, the last time you and I talked, we were talking about how we don't need police officers to be first responders for mental health calls. We don't need the police to do half of the things that they're doing, including enforcing traffic laws, because again, it's deadly for Black and brown people. Mm-hmm. So we need to put in place systems that would take that responsibility from law enforcement and put it in the hands of other people who are unarmed and who are not law enforcement. And we see other cities in California doing that. The other part is we have so much technology that whoever does this job, again, non-law enforcement, they can simply take a picture of a license plate that has a registration tab that's expired, send that information to the DMV. The DMV can then send a citation or a notice to the person. But there are ways that we can actually stop the level at which police officers interact with us in our communities. And the other part is that it is in our power to dictate how police officers show up in our communities. We've allowed for them to have the power for so long, but it's the people who are mostly impacted who should be the decision makers. It's not about the chief of police. It's not about the mayor. It is about the community members deciding how and if police officers should show up in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, that goes like I actually, talked about with last year with, President Biden and his wife. Our family actually met with them after the shooting of my brother, Jacob. And when we met with them, there was a couple of things that, I obviously wanted to address. And one of them was in Chicago, the police accountability committee that would be put together by the community members. And this would be ensuring that, there was a overlooking council that can overlook not only the actions of these police officers, but also who's elected to their areas. I've talked multiple times about the idea of officers having to be from that specific and have families in that neighborhood and be a resident of that neighborhood in order to be enforcing, or not even enforcing, in order to be serving and protecting that neighborhood. It creates a familiar face. It creates an understanding of life, creates just a mutual companionship between your residents and, someone that's working class within in that community. I think that's so important for us to understand each other a lot more, because, we can't decide exactly who's going to apply to be a police officer. We can't decide who's exact. We can definitely push more people to be of that. But at the end of the day, that's not our decision. But what we can do is get to know each other more, to the point where we're more comfortable and we can understand the struggles of our neighborhood. If you pull up to, Joseph's house, and Joseph, has had a long issue since, and I've known him since he was 6, right? But the police officer never met Joseph. You spoke a little about mental health crisis, and that's becoming a major plague in the Black community, of them coming to situations and not being ready to take care of or handle with care someone that is going through a mental health crisis. I actually had a friend of mine and Jake's that recently was, the police were called to a mental health crisis, and they had been a little bit frustrated because they weren't allowed to be on the premises multiple times and had been denied, probably because of the outcome of my brother's situation. And this is somebody that was close to us growing up and was very, very much affected, by my bro's situation. So, probably was very uneasy about the police coming. And, given the events, I don't know all the details, but I do know that he was penetrated by a bullet from outside of his home. He was in the inside of his home, and the shots came from the outside of his home. So, that goes to show you, and this was, claimed that he had a weapon that was obviously never found, all from a mental health crisis. And these are the type of things that just show the lack of accountability and preparation of, these so-called, forces. They like to call themselves police forces, right?
And
why is it called the police force? What are we forcing? What are we enforcing? And it's a very difficult time. But I wanted to talk a little bit about. I wanted to shift it just a little bit into the trauma issue, because as I look at both of you right now and speak to you, and then also just look at myself in this Zoom mirror that we call it, we all have experienced a decent amount of trauma, whether it's been in the last 2 years, last year, last month, last week, our entire lives, and we're all in the fight for our lives. Ultimately, I like to always push back to that, because you can push it into so many different subcategories, but ultimately we're fighting for our lives and the lives of our future. I have 2 boys, so every day that's a push for me. But as we think about the things that we've been through, as we think about the things that have happened and occurred, how are you two specifically dealing and shifting and embracing and just processing the trauma included with the work that you're doing? How are you guys processing that? Are you using it as fuel? Is it used as, do you have to mask it? Talk about a little bit about your experience with trauma, because oftentimes people see the work that you're doing, and say, these people are awesome. They're doing great things. They're pushing, but they don't understand we're hurting at the same time constantly. So I just want you guys to share a little bit about your experience. I think it could definitely be some light that could be shed on some of our viewers.
Bruce, you want to take it first?
Sure. Honestly, for me, man, I just look at our generation behind us, and they need to be able to look up to somebody, especially in my sport, especially somebody who's from, Alabama, where growing up it was black and white and that was it. And you just had to deal with whatever came your way, growing up and then coming into this world of the professional baseball, traveling a little bit, this, that, and the other. It's not too different, no matter where I go, for people of color. You still have the judgment. You still have the eyes everywhere. You still have the assumptions that you're doing something wrong because you have a nice vehicle or you have nice clothes on. I was like, you have that surrounding you. So you either have to play victim or you got to do something about it. And the shitty part about that is, and me and you talked about this the other day, me and Miss Wright over here talked about it last time we discussed, the first person that stands up for it's usually the bloodiest. I mean, and it comes with it. It never gets less. You just get used to it. And so for me, man, I just like, I have this thing on my phone. It's on my lock screen. I'm going to show you this, if you can see this. This little kid right here. Okay. He's a son of my college track coach. Okay. When I was in college, he was like 4 years old, like not even 4, I think. He fell in love with me. Okay. He fell in love with how I played, how I spoke to him, how I always respected him and his parents. And to this day, this little kid sends me videos like every other week telling me he's proud of me and he looks up to me. I'm a hero to him. And that's where I'm from. I never played for his dad. I never did anything, but that's my motivation. Because no matter what I'm going through, no matter what I'm struggling, somebody somewhere that looks like me has it worse. And from your brother to all of the victims that we've witnessed, like, we still have an opportunity to make a difference, because a lot of them didn't wake up, and so it's one of those things that people have to understand. We don't live in the era of Martin Luther King anymore. We don't live in the era of Malcolm X, who now we put our pedestals and our eyes on athletes and rich people. And we don't have enough rich people that look like us, that care about us, to make a difference. So now we have to find everybody that's struggling, everybody that's blue collar, every woman that wants to make a difference, every man that wants to put themselves aside. And we have to find some way, somehow, to come together, because at the end of the day, the system is screwed up. It's pushed against us. And until we all get on the same page and share the same light, it's never going to get any better, because you can't play victim no more. We've always been a victim. That's how our country was founded. This is how it's supposed to work. So for us to be able to resist, we have to be one, because I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to stick by this till the day that I pass away. The only thing that America right now is fearful of now, back then, in the future, is a group of Black, intelligent, wealthy, powerful people. That is it, because nobody's made as strong as us. Nobody's been through the shit we've been through. Nobody's had to overcome the history just to make a buck. And at the end of the day, when we put all that shit together and we come together, guess what? Sports are ours. CEO companies are ours. Fortune 500s would be ours. School system would be ours. I mean, I'll pass this over to you. Think about this. In the day and age of inequality, our school system's going on these rants right now, trying to ban Black and brown history taught in high schools, middle schools, whatever you want to call it. In the last 10 years, actually last 12 years, I think, might be 10 or 12 years, in college, overall college, Black women have crushed the amount of people that graduate with honors, that come out being heads of the companies, doctors, lawyers, whatever it is. They've absolutely destroyed Black men, white women, other people of color as a collective group. So imagine if we have a group that is mixed between men and women of people of color, that take education serious, that have outlets to make a difference, that can band together when times are tough, no matter if we're talking about in California, we're talking about in Maine, we're talking about in Florida. Imagine us creating an environment where we all can be one and strive for the same goals, man. Like, and that's how I deal with my trauma. I have days where I wake up and I don't want to get out of bed, but at the same time, I have kids that look up to me. We have work to do, because at the end of the day, even when we pass away, we're still not done. So I deal with it because I use this shit as fuel. Because if I stop now, I let every single kid in the world and person that looks like me down, because I've already started. I can't quit.
And see, he just touched on exactly what I was about to say. I use it as fuel. That's what fuels the work that I do. How I find the next issue is literally what I get angry about. People think that calling someone an angry Black woman is a put down. Well, no, because there's righteous anger, and I'm righteously angered a lot by the injustices that I see. And I take that anger and I transform it into that fuel that propels me to do the work. Now, you talked about trauma, so I do have to keep it real. It can stop you in your tracks. You can get so sidelined by trauma because it is there in your core. You are hurt. You are cut deeply. It affects parts of your psyche. It affects your physical being. It affects your emotional state. It can mess with you on a spiritual level. And so there is something I just put up over my bed. Y'all probably saw the ads. I'm a sucker for them. These people, they listen to my thoughts on Facebook, so they put up all these ads in my timeline. So
the FBI, I'm telling you.
Yes, the FBI too. Yes.
Telling you.
I don't know if the FBI put this in my my feed, but if they did, thank you. But it's a cassette tape. It's like a big picture that looks like a cassette tape, and it says, "Pause if you must, but don't stop." And I put that up over my bed as a reminder. It is okay. You know, and Paula, you were talking earlier, I think before the recording started, about self-care. I just came back from Hawaii. Why? Because last week I was down in the depths of looking into stuff and was just like, oh my goodness, I need to take some time away. I didn't stop. I pressed pause and I took my computer to Honolulu and started doing the work with a better view.
Okay.
So that's what we have to do. But if we need to take a break and pause, we have to know it's okay. And what Bruce is talking about as far as inspiring that next generation, at some point, we are going to have to pass the mantle. We're going to have to pass the baton. So we need to get okay with sitting ourselves down and not feeling like the world is on our shoulders, because we need to be training up our babies to carry on the fight. Now, I don't want my babies having to fight. I'm hoping that all this racism and all this other crap can be eradicated by then. You know, we have to be okay. And you know, not a full criticism on the generation that came before us, but a lot of these folks are still in the fight, and truthfully, they're in the way. Mm-hmm. They need to take a back seat. They need to train up the next generation. They need to mentor. They need to share their wisdom, because you can't stay in the fight forever.
Exactly.
And if you keep all of that wisdom to yourself, you do nothing for the movement. You do nothing for the revolution. The revolution has to be carried on. Correct. And so being okay with not being okay and saying I'm not okay because I am healing, being able to take a moment and also being able to say, hey, y'all, I'm gonna rest for a second. Y'all keep going, I'll catch up with you. But that's why we need to be preparing our babies and preparing the next generation. Now, Bruce, I am going to answer your other question when you're talking about the public defenders. So I'll tie that in with this and the trauma, right? I was a public defender first in Riverside County, and then I came back home. And as you said, I was a public defender from 2006 to 2019. What I saw as a public defender was that all of my clients, the majority of them looked like me. They were Black or they were brown. but the attorneys and the judges, not so Black or brown, right? So all of the people who were impacted the most really had no representation in the courtroom as decision makers. And as far as the advocates for them.
Correct.
That is problematic, which is why I like to recruit young Black kids to think about being attorneys, and attorneys who are not prosecutors with the lock them up mentality, but to be public defenders who are going to go in there and fight and say, I know that the system is rigged, even against public defenders. And I could do a whole talk on that. But we need you there in the courtroom, and we need you to ascend to the bench, on the federal bench and on the state side. We need more people who look like us, who are impacted, because it changes how the work is done. It changes how you advocate when you come from the same neighborhood as your client, which was my case. I grew up right here in Southeast San Diego. And, they said, oh, you grew up in low income housing and you grew up with a bunch of gang members and you'll never go to college. Well, not only did I go to college, I went to law school, I passed the bar, I got my master's of law, and now I'm coming in here and I'm going to use the law to dismantle the system. And I'm also going to use the law to kick your butts as I represent my homeboys in court. And that's how I started off. See, before I was a public defender, I was taking the cases of my homeboys that were being prosecuted. And so again, it's about taking all of your experiences in life and letting it feed your purpose and letting it fuel your purpose and your work. And so when I see things like one Black public defender in the entire state of California, we have 58 counties. There is one Black public defender in the entire state of California. His name is Brendan Woods. And if you all can ever get him on this podcast, you should. I love Brendan Woods.
I'll find a way to reach out to him for sure.
Yes, he is amazing. I can link you. And he's constantly bringing the issue of the underfunding and the under-resourcing of public defender offices to the forefront. And he said something that stayed with me. He said, many people believe that prosecutors are the most powerful actors in the system. But I disagree. If defenders have more power than people realize, is what he said. He says, if you don't believe me, then fund us properly. If you fund public defender offices the same way you fund prosecutor offices, things are going to change and we can see who holds the real power. And so there's this power dynamic that our criminal legal system recognizes. This is why they keep Black and brown people in poorer neighborhoods. They keep their neighborhoods more poor. They don't resource them the same way that they do other sections of the city. Our roads aren't paved the same way, let's say, roads in La Jolla are paved. They don't give us the same budget. They don't talk about equity. They want to talk about equality. No, you have been under-resourcing us for decades and even centuries. It's now time to talk about equity. And it's the same way with the public defender offices. Less paralegals, less investigators when compared to DA offices, and DA's budgets are vast and huge, and public defender offices, their budgets pale in comparison. But what happens when we give the staffing to public defender offices? One of you mentioned 100 cases, right? Some public defenders have 100 cases at a time. That is very true. So what happens if we give them more lawyers? If we allow for their budget to allow for more attorneys and more paralegals? When I was a public defender, I never had a paralegal on my case. I didn't know we had paralegals, but the DAs have paralegals and investigators who call and coordinate their witnesses. I'm in the hallways of the courtroom, coordinating my witnesses and doing all of that stuff and making sure my witnesses are in court on time to take the stand so that my client actually has a good defense. It's not the same game. It's the same way that they've increased police budgets year after year after year, but they constantly want to talk about public safety. We cannot talk about public safety when you're increasing police budgets and you're increasing the DA's budgets, but you are leaving whole communities traumatized without proper funding, without good jobs, without actually creating businesses in these neighborhoods, without fully funding defense work.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop right there.
No, that's what you said about the training of people of color to transition into prison. Like, I've literally been thinking about that since you mentioned it, because I have this thing that's like, we talk about these communities that are underfunded, that are not taken care of. You talked about the roads, the school system, the materials, all the shit. Okay, you think about that. You go into a underdeveloped or underprivileged community, people of color. Okay, you go to their schools, their gas stations, their restaurants. Every single thing about those communities are preparing them for the disgusting malnourishment of prison. I was like, people want to talk about, banning this and banning that. I'm like, if you took the time as a community to make sure all of your schools look the same, if all of your schools were funded, if all of your schools had the proper material, then we would subconsciously change the narrative. I was like, but guess what? I was like, if you're growing up in an area where your school system's disgusting, your school building's disgusting, you don't have anything on the playground, you're missing books, you're missing desks, you don't have enough room in a classroom for kids, all these things, if you prepare children subconsciously and you put them in that environment, that's the only environment they'll know. And so school, and this is just my personal opinion, Polly, you can hop in on this one. School right now, especially the way the government is trying to control the way school is, especially when we're talking about elementary school, middle school, high school, whatever. It is a uniformed process in the way it is done, because at the end of the day, if they changed the way school was running, if they changed any type of functionability of the school system, they would lose control of those kids. And here's why. You go into a prison, okay? I personally never been in one. I know people that have been in there, but you go into a prison, you watch a movie, whatever it is, you're only allowed out of your room when it's time. You eat at a specific time that's not dictated by you or your peers. You're only allotted X amount of times on the yard. You can only wear this. And this is how you have to behave, because if you don't, you will be punished. What do people think the school system is? Like, I had stepkids, 8 and 5 when I was married. I know people with kids, and their kids come home all the time and they're like, I was just, hey, why'd you do this in class? I was just bored. Like, this is stupid. I'm not learning anything. Because you're not. Your teacher is memorizing what's on this book. If you don't read it, you will be evaluated as unaccomplished, ignorant, and you will not be rewarded down the road. That's what our school system teaches. So if you put that in an underprivileged community and you show them that you don't give a damn about them, then what's their options? But then when they turn out to be good, or when they turn out to be successful, whatever it is, you're like, oh, well, man, that's a rare thing coming from where you come from. That's the stigma. That's the stigma. All these stigmas that we have against kids that are successful because their motivation was coming from shitty houses or their school system or whatever it is. I'm sick as a people that has to be our motivation.
Yeah.
It's not just, you know what? I'm going to be the man my mama raised me to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
It always has something to do with something. Like it always has to, when it comes to successful people of color. But then when that person's not successful and they succumb to the society that they grew up in, it's our fault. It's those people's fault. When easily with police systems, and like we talked about last time, easily with police systems, they can change the type of response teams we have. When it comes to traffic stops, if there are people that do traffic stops, they should not be armed. They should still be police, quote unquote, but they should be like mall cops. If we're talking about people running red lights, you got cameras on red lights. You better send them a ticket in the mail. I mean, there's so many ways around it because there are some areas in America that do things in a progressive form. Even the toll roads, you go up in the Northeast or in Florida. If you ain't got one of them passes, dog, they scan your license plate, they send it to you in the mail. You ain't never see a cop, you never see a person, don't matter.
That reminds me, Bruce, it's just like when a cop comes up to you and I call them cops, by the way. I don't call them police officers. I think that's too prestigious. When they come up to you and approach your car, it's just like you just want to be like, bro, give me my ticket so I can go at this point. You know what I mean? And so that makes total sense. You know, just send it to me, because at this point I'll take it, whatever, and I'll fight it later, or I will, you know, pay the ticket, because I just don't want the experience with you at this point.
Exactly. And you know, that situation right there, and this is what's intriguing about doing that. You can't have the police force and or the government talking about, oh, well, this is going to jeopardize my officer's safety because it's getting to them electronically. I was like, so every way they're going to try and spin that, if that does become a thing, unless we're talking about a guy who's getting reported because he's intoxicated or he's under the influence and he's swerving all over the road, so therefore endangering other people. If we're talking about a registration, if we're talking about running a red light, yeah, there's some stipulations with those things. Running a red light, you could kill somebody. But guess what? If you play sports, you can break your leg too. Like, doesn't mean we avoid it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And that's exactly why we wrote the Protect Ordinance here in San Diego. And it's going to be going in front of the San Diego City Council in the fall. So Protect is an acronym, and it stands for Preventing Over-Policing Through Equitable Community Treatment. Okay. And through this ordinance, we want to ban the use of consensual searches, so that when officers stop someone for a traffic stop, they cannot say, hey, can I search your bag? Can I search your purse? Can I search your car? Because we know that folks who just want to get on their way, who thinks, if I say no, then this officer's going to get mad. It's going to be bad for me. They're going to say yes. But why do you need to search me? You need to write my ticket, like you were saying, Paulie, and I just want to get home. The other thing that's going to happen with the Protect Ordinance is that it's going to ban pretextual stops. So those pretext stops, like I talked about a little earlier, that we list out in the ordinance, are equipment violations, right? So I would see this time and time again as a public defender, that whatever charges my client now has, it all stemmed from them maybe not having a backlight that worked, or it stemmed from a license plate light not working. Before that, I didn't even realize that certain vehicles had license plate lights.
Yeah.
And so when it would be out on a client's car, they would get pulled over for that, and then it would start the ball rolling to something bigger, because then they're charging them with not obeying an officer. I mean, you would just see these things snowball because of the interactions on what should have been routine traffic stops. And so we're hoping that the city of San Diego will pass this ordinance, because we really have got to get to a place where we recognize that we should be limiting what police officers can do, and especially on traffic stops. And that's why I really like the idea of just eliminating them from traffic enforcement. And we're seeing that places like Berkeley, they're doing the unarmed officers enforcing traffic stops. And I just think that we have to think outside of the box, and we have to think differently. We can't continue thinking the same way that got us to where we are today.
Oh, for
The
sure.
good thing about that, like, there's two things I want to say about that. Since it's fresh on my mind, practices like having an officer that's unarmed approaching the car for a traffic stop, and then maybe having an armed officer remain in the car in case of emergency. If something was to happen, I don't see the mindset of someone of color, or myself personally. I'll speak for myself personally. Yes, I feel rages of vengeance at times. Yes, I feel very uneasy in the presence of a police officer around me, period. And have thoughts that that make me feel a certain type of way about these individuals. But do I see myself, consciously realizing, hey, this person doesn't have a weapon, I'm going to attack them? No, and I don't think that's the overall sense of the people of color, period. The Black community, the BIPOC community, period. Even though we have suffered this trauma and these experiences of them initiating that force on us, I still think in our hearts, in my heart, that wouldn't be an ending result of those type of interactions. I think that gets us on our way easier. That creates a better interaction between the two parties, and we get to moving, and we flourish. I think the BIPOC community right now is focused on flourishing. We want to flourish as a collective, and that's an interesting way to go about things, seriously. And then also to talk about that initial point of contact, and that what they call probable cause on why I'm pulling someone over, which is those tail lights and those license plate lights. I am a co-founder and executive director of Edify, which is our partner on a series with All Star Advocacy, and we actually are implementing and having an event in California that is in the process, in the works, with an LA Chargers, used to be the San Diego Chargers, a player on that team that I won't release yet. You guys hold on that, but we are actually holding a what we call a brake light clinic, right? So it hit near and dear when you said that, because this is an event where we hire local mechanics, union mechanics, that can come in and fix these services for free for people to save their lives, right? And when I use that wording, sometimes people think I'm taking extreme, but ultimately it gets to that point, unnecessarily, from a tail light, from a license plate light. So we're going to put together something where we're going to be fixing people's tail lights in the city for free, for them to come out. And then also to engage in education, engage in different resources that will be available to them. So yeah, that's something that we really can touch base on, because that happens so often based on a traffic stop, based on a light,
Yeah.
So.
And it happens, bro. Like it's crazy the amount of the distance people are willing to go to try to rectify the same quote unquote crime or violation for the difference in two people. It's amazing the lengths they'll go when it's a person of color to criminalize us in any shape or form. But it's also amazing the distance they'll go right for a white person or a person that's not colored. It's not a person of color, whatever you want to say, to make them seem like they just had a bad day. And it's amazing because these traffic stops, man, these encounters just in public in general, dude. I know you guys have seen them. I've seen videos of guys chasing cops, white dudes, chasing police officers, taking their batons from them, hitting them with them. We got people over here getting pulled over on a traffic stop, talking mad shit to the police officer. The police officer keeps his distance. You see his hands the whole time. He's frustrated because he can't talk to the lady. I said, but when you walk up to a vehicle and there's people of color in it, first thing you want to do is be aggressive. Yeah. And as a police force, and we both have, all three of us have talked about this before, with that type of power, you can't have bad apples. You can't, because I use this example all the time. You have a surgeon that gets the wrong form for their patient. They didn't do it, but their nurse messed up. Okay. They perform the wrong surgery. That person dies. They get sued, disbarred, and they go to prison. They go to prison over something they did not even do. All they were doing, following directions. Somebody else's fault. And I said, and that's in the medical field. I said, there are certain jobs in our world that you cannot have bad apples, because at the end of the day, your job, if you do it wrong or in the wrong way at any sort, you could take somebody's life. And there's not a thing on this planet that is more valuable than each and every one of our lives. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care what kind of company you started. I don't care how many vehicles you got. Ain't nothing more important than humanity. And the whole definition of a police force is so skewed right now because we've had so many people in power that have just not protected the people of America. And subsequently, it's been happening more times than not to people of color, not just Black people, not just Mexican people, not just actual like Africans, not any of those things. A lot of these people has happened to, we are citizens. It ain't like we just hopped down the ocean and hopped the wall, my mans. Like we was born here, we was doing these things, but it's the system. It's the system. We have to eliminate even people in general. I know so many people that get on edge when they get pulled over because they ran a red light, of all races, but they get on edge because they see what's happening. They literally see what's happening. And it's just amazing. And I'm loving that we have you on here today, because you are in this judicial system. Like, you are in this part of the world that we don't know, because at the end of the day, like you said, we need more people that look like us. We need more people that give back to their people. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be where you're from, but we have to show people as a group, that this generation that we're in, we have to show people that it's cool, that it's honorable, that it's respectful, that it's hard, but it's worth it in the end to take care of your own. That's what the Black Wall Street was. And guess what? It got bombed by our government because we were too independent. We were too strong. We were too peaceful. They need chaos, because they need chaos from people of color, because then they feel like they really can hide behind the Constitution and be like, this is what we vowed to do.
That Tulsa massacre.
Bro, telling you, dog, like this is so crazy. And there's so many people that are so washed in today's world, because even people that look like us, because they were raised to teach to understand and to feel like what they look like and how they do their things are not correct. They're not correct. So now we have identity issues. We have the mental health side of things. We have so many problems in these communities. And so, more times than not, people of color get denied for help, for resources, for the equal opportunities, for extra care, because, you have a single mom who has to get off work a little later, and you're like, oh no, we can't keep your kid. Like, no, we can't keep him an extra 20 minutes. But I guarantee you, the same kid that came on and wasn't a person of color, they'd be like, oh, take your time, we'll be here.
Yeah, no, for us, it's like $20 an extra minute, man. You gotta,
yeah, but it's just real, and it's a stigma everywhere. It's crazy.
Well, I was gonna say, for us, we've moved from the dings and fees per minutes to just straight up calling the police or CPS on Black people. Oh, they're 5 minutes late getting their kids from daycare, so let me call the police.
Bang.
We get the police called on us for anything. There's a state senator here. Her name is Sydney Camlogger. And love her, love what she stands for, love what she's doing in Sacramento. But she did a video talking about how a Black family in her district was met by the police after the woman gave birth at home. They arrested this family for giving birth at home to their child. When I tell you that the Black family is not respected, that we are dehumanized at every turn, that we don't have agency over our bodies, this is a very real thing.
Was that
now the police are coming into our homes when we give birth with the assistance of a midwife or a doula or whatever. We have to really think about how close we are to slavery and the philosophies that were deeply embedded and entrenched in the systems at that time, and how similar they are right now, and why people have learned, mostly white people who we have now deemed Karens, have learned to manipulate the system, because that's how it has always been. The system has always worked for the white Southern belles. The system has always worked for the white slave driver. The system has always worked. This is where we got police, I'm not going to call them forces, but sheriff departments and police departments, was this idea that we needed to keep Black people in check, that we needed to maintain control of their bodies. This idea that Black bodies are to be controlled is something that permeates every part of our society. So we don't have to just be in our prisons to have our bodies controlled. We can be sleep in our bed like Breonna Taylor and be killed. That's one way of controlling our bodies, by killing us. We don't have control over our bodies in our own homes again when we give birth to children in our own homes. This is what's happening in America right now.
No, it's as real as you can get. It goes down straight to the overall control of the bodies. I mean, for me, I feel like we're in modern day slavery in this country, and here's why. People want to use that description of, oh, well, you've played in the big leagues. Oh, you've made a lot of money. Oh, LeBron James is a billionaire, blah, 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 blah. I said, but guess what? I said, everywhere he goes, I said, the only reason he has respect from people of authority is because of the money he's made. Not because he's a good guy. Not because he's a great father. Not because he just built a whole community back where he's from because he ain't come from shit. Not because he gives back to the community of LA. Not because of any of that. He gets respect because the people of authority in his region, whatever area, they can't touch him because he is who he is. So they're forced to respect him because they know if they touch him and they do something that's uncalled for, or it's not right, it's not politically correct or whatever, they are screwed because that man can do whatever the hell he wants. I said, he can go out and light shit on fire. He could probably go out there and commit a crime. And guess what? Somebody would find a way to make sure that he's not proven guilty of it. I was like, but I said, our respect comes with how wealthy we are in this country. Because at the end of the day, if you ain't doing whatever you're doing, if you're a person of color, if you're making money and it's not benefiting the white people, it's not benefiting people, these people that do all these dances, music, whatever it is. If you're doing something that's influential, but you're keeping it to yourself or your own people, that's when you get taken down. As long as they're benefiting from it for that time being, as you're popular, they'll deal with it. And that's how it's always been, though. Even back in slavery, guess what? The color of the skin didn't stop slave owners from fornicating with slaves. I was like, people want to think about, we stepped out the box about calling mixed kids and mixed races and stuff. I was like, you might want to talk about the people who came here and killed all the Native Americans and raped their wives and their kids and killed them and this, that, and the other. So they started that. I said, that started before we even got here. I was like, so it's just so funny how everything's skewed when it comes to one side or the other. But at the end of the day, we aren't in modern day slavery, because the only way we get respect, is if we know somebody that we can have in our pocket that actually truly knows who we are and knows that we're good people and vouch for us. We have to have a vouch in whatever it is. You're in the legal system. Me and Paulie do all these things outside of, our respective fields. I was like, unless we have somebody that's more powerful than us to validate us, we ain't shit, regardless if we're speaking the truth. And so it's all about money, man. It's all about, that's power. But that's how it's always been.
So let me add to that, because it's true. But take LeBron, put him in a baseball cap, put him in a hoodie, put him in a car. And if all the police officer sees is a Black man and he does not know it's LeBron,
100%,
he is going to be held to the same standard, I'll just use it and say it that way, as a quote unquote, just another Black man. And we've seen Black athletes be taken down and slammed by the police, treated unfairly, abused. And after the fact, when they find out, oh shoot, this is a basketball player in the NBA.
And then they get defended.
It shouldn't take all of that. It should not take the fact that I am a pro ball player for you to respect me.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so, and I do want to say this, because Paula, you were talking about how as Black people, we're really not violent people. We really are not. And so this fear that they have of Black people is so unfounded to me. Yes, we had the Nat Turners, which I probably would have been if I was there. I would have been Nat Tina Turner. But by and large, we are such a peaceful people that if we wanted to tear this whole place down,
it's over.
We could, and we could have been done that, right? But they're so afraid, and this is going back to what you were talking about, Bruce. They're so afraid of Black unity, Black solidarity, which is why they're able to play these games where they divide us. The reason why Black people are not as powerful as we can be is because we have fallen prey to the strategies of, I'm going to say it, the white man. I know you ain't heard that since In Living Color, but these are people who benefit from the way the system is.
Correct.
And so they're going to perpetuate that system. And as long as they can get the Candaces of the world and whoever else was, a Black Trumpian and all this other crap, then they can always not have us all on one page. If they can get some of us to think that we're better than the others. Well, I'm Ben Carson. I wouldn't have to go through that. Here's the crazy part, and now I'm just riffing. But you got Ben Carson. He grew up in subsidized housing, grew up in the projects. He becomes Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And what's one of the first things he wants to do? Tear down the housing that actually enables poor people who can't afford housing to have shelter for their families.
One of the ones he came from.
You came from this. You were able to then become a doctor. And instead of actually using all of the things that you've come to know and the people you've come to know, and now your power and influence to build us up or to help the next person, you want to tear us down. And that's what happens in Black America. I can't speak about what happens in Trinidad. I can't speak about what happens in Uganda. I can tell you about in America. This is why we cannot get to where we need to be as a people. Yes, some of us have quote unquote made it or made it out, but we cannot get to where we need to be as a people until we start to think about ourselves as a people,
Mhm.
that we are all a part of the African diaspora, and we've got to get a handle on all of these philosophies that we shouldn't be subscribing to. The stuff that I'm seeing right now, just on Twitter, people attacking me and saying crazy stuff. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, aren't you a Black man who's out here and
Mhm.
saying you're pro-Black and
Exactly.
you want to build up the community? So why are you attacking me?
Mhm.
You know, it's unfortunate, but again, and I'll say, hurt people, and we have to deal with the trauma in our communities. But there's just so many ways that we're divisive with one another. If you're not Black enough, if you think you're better, if you equate yourself with, trying to be associated with the upper echelon, so you think you're better than Black people who came from where you came from.
Mhm.
There's so many ways that we're divided, and we really have to have a conversation with ourselves about this, because their number one fear is us waking up and really rebuilding and being back to where we used to be when we talk about Black Wall Street.
And
Dual
we can
power.
do better.
Get our economics together as a Black people,
Mhm.
we would be unstoppable. I mean, this is why they had to burn down Tulsa. This is why this is why they firebomb the Move House. This is why they destroy everything that is powerful that Black people build, because they know when we come together, we are unstoppable.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. Have you guys ever been afraid of a person that you didn't do wrong? And that's kind of my point. Like, these people
Every
are
day,
afraid
every
of,
day, every day.
I've been saying these people are afraid of Black people because they know deep down in their soul and the history of our country, they fucked up.
Yeah. But we will not render unto them what they have done. We are such a peaceful and a loving people. And this is why it
Want to be
does
equal.
upset me that we're even painted the way that they do in the media, how they paint us, how these narratives get formed. And it's so ridiculous, because as Black people, we are so loving and so kind and so peaceful and so forgiving. There is not another people like us. The things that has been done to us completely destroyed generations of families, have completely harmed whole communities. And yet we have not rendered unto them what they rightfully deserve.
With that destruction of like families and upbringings and proper education and proper etiquette and proper and when I say proper, I mean effective in our households. I don't mean proper as in the coin phrase "speak like a white person" or you speak white or anything like that. I mean effective communication in our communities and our culture. When you speak about that, that goes back to the trauma. When you speak about, us attacking each other, this is a product of these families just being washed away, not ever being taught how to communicate effectively to each other. The frustration of the disparities has torn us apart. So when you get to a situation where somebody is attacking you, Bruce, which both of you have had a lot of scrutiny in your positions I had to witness a lot of scrutiny, with the involvement of my brother's situation and then just myself as well throughout life. But when it like in a major sense, like rapidly and abundantly, you two, my brother, you guys had to deal with that. And it's ridiculous. And I think that comes from us not listening and us not really healing from that trauma that I was talking about. And that was kind of a point I was getting at, because we do need to address these issues between us. And if we aren't willing to openly heal from those and understand where we're coming from in a place of fight, I think that it's going to be so much resistance from even people that are supposed to be banded and collectively moving forward together. Because, like Bruce said, a big point of my mission is I want this to look cool. I want kids to look at this and say, hey, this is a dope thing to do. Give back to my community, have fun with them, understand each other, and move forward as a unit. Not, hey, they're talking about, this. I need to be worried about this. Yes, I want kids to be kids, but I want them also to understand themselves and how to move us all forward as people.
Good.
And so
Huge.
a number one part of that for me is us healing together in conversation. And it was a little bit disturbing for me to listen to both of you say, like, we got to keep it moving, because you know what? That's the natural defense mechanism that you two have as fighters, as people of color, to say, we got to keep it moving, especially you as a Black man, especially you as a Black woman. You guys are like fighters. And it's like, yo, you give your second a little bit of space to go chill and see what looks good on the other side, that better view. But guess what? That hurt didn't go away. You know what I mean? That pain didn't go away. And people of your caliber, you guys ultimately feel like you don't have any choice. And that hurts me, right? That hurts me. I've come into my own where I've started to recognize where that pain can affect us on a daily. And you two are just prime examples. I pretty much set you guys up because I know how y'all roll. Y'all warriors. Y'all are built from that cloth of respect of your people and fighting until you can't fight anymore, and also passing it down. But we have to address the fact that we have to heal, and whether it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen every single day. Well, it can happen every single day, but that 1% of us getting better educationally, morally, spiritually, we have to do that health-wise too. You know what I mean? We have to do that mentally. We have to do that with the trauma that we have. So, and that's how that funnels into, us really pushing the youth into other spots. I think it's so important. What you said was, I have a nephew who got straight A's. This is, my sister Letitra's son. He got straight A's in school. And this was all during the situation. We were out in Wisconsin for a month and a half, tending to the family when, Jacob got shot. Nobody's from Wisconsin. Jacob was isolated, living there with his family and his kids. And we had to relocate. So that means kids come out of school. That means we come out of jobs. That means, we come together and round up. But he got straight A's. He showed me his report card. I would check up on him, and it was mind-boggling to me how, he was able to keep the focus, use his resources to achieve such a feat. And during such a turmoil time like this, right? And it made me think about what you guys just said. We got to just keep on going. But ultimately, I was like, wow, I'm starting to meet some influential people in the Black community that are pushing for the very cause that affected his life this year. You know what I mean? And, being his uncle, me and Jacob, we're trying to guide him in this space. And I could only instantly think, wow, what if my nephew became a Black lawyer, in a space where, it's already hard enough for these kids to get good grades, to keep straight A's in a system, not only a system, but also households that, shout out to my sister who makes sure my nephews and nieces are educated, especially on who they are. She's been doing that for years. They used to call her Letitra X on Facebook because she was that one talking about what it wasn't cool to talk about, right? Yeah. Some people would feel it. Some people would be like, this Facebook, we're supposed to be messing around type situation. But she was speaking it into power. And then this very much happened to us. And that's what I don't want, is people to wait until it happens to them and to them to understand and for it to be cool.
Exactly.
But yeah, I applaud you in looking to influence young people of color to become to step into these positions of power and creating the resources for them to do that. A lot of them don't believe they can get there. A lot of them don't have that intrinsic motivation and push, when it's talking about getting food on the table, or the conversation with their mother or father is deconstructive. You know what I mean? The communication isn't there. You know why? Because it's shut up and listen to everything that I'm telling you to do, right? Because I'm stressed from work and I'm stressed from this and I'm stressed from that and I'm stressed, which is all justified because the system has stacked the odds against the Black woman and Black man to pin them against each other. So, it's such a crazy dynamic, but I think emotionally we have to heal as people together, piece by piece, day by day. And we can start with our own affirmations, right? Mm-hmm. Our own thing says, put it on a pause, but make sure you press play again. So we continue to spread that type of light, that type of love. I know that wasn't a question, but I thought it was important to share that with you guys because, as I go through my journey, I learned so much more about, what we need, what I need in order to effectively help the people that I want to help, you know what I mean? Which is our people move forward as well.
Dude, this is the whole reason of this podcast, man. Like, I was talking to my mom the other day because I was super excited about this, and it's just something I've always wanted to do. And I told her, I said, if this podcast doesn't do anything else, I said, it's going to give one person that looks like us a little bit of hope and the ability to heal. I said, I have taken a lot of crap in my adulthood, my life, whatever. I said, if I had to take shit for this for the rest of my life, for somebody behind me to not, I'm down. Let's go. Because that's how important this is to me, because I saw my mom, be called a nigger lover. I saw my sister get called a coon on a basketball court. I've been threatened to get hanged because my baseball team won a baseball tournament. I mean, just all these things in like you guys said, just from personal experiences, traumas, things you've seen, things you've heard, this and the other. It digs down into a point where you're like, you know what? The only thing I know how to do is fight. But I'm going to do it in a way that's going to help somebody else behind me that's listening, that's experiencing maybe similarities to how I grew up or whatever it is. Give them an opportunity to either avoid it or go through it a little easier. And that's the point of all this. And this is what we need as a community, whether it be lawyers, whether it be baseball players, whether it be football players, whether it be janitors, whether it be government officials, whatever it is. But we all need to have some way or some form to put out that positive that you are beautiful. You are meant to be who you are. It's okay to have natural hair. It's okay to wear your Jordans and your jeans a certain way. Yes, there's a certain way to go about looking like a professional. That just goes across the board. But it's like we've been taught everything that we do is wrong because it doesn't benefit the people in charge. And that's the point of this, man. Getting everybody together, talking the shit, whatever it is, sharing experiences, sharing what we see, because somebody is going to watch this and they're going to have an easier time understanding and healing. That's what it is. Because this ain't for the older generation, because they're set in their ways. You can't control them for nothing. Okay, they on their way out. But what we can do is change the way our generation thinks, and then we can definitely change the lives of the ones behind us. And that's what this is, man. This is phenomenal that we were able to get together today.
I'm so honored to be in the presence of you guys and sharing these conversations. I wanted to kind of wrap it up, but I wanted to get your final thoughts on on anything. I mean, I wanted you to spill out a little bit about how you felt during this conversation, about any new revelations that we may have brought upon you, and then something that you could share with the viewers that, you know, you think can help progressively push forward our notion of the people.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm just thinking about how unfortunate and unfair it is as Black people to have to think about training our kids in a certain way, right? You mentioned, Paulie, allowing for kids to be kids. And that's something that I deeply believe in. Kids have to be kids. We don't need to adultify our children any more than the police does, than the media does, than the powers that be already do. But there's a recognition in the Black community that we have to equip our children with knowledge that prepares them to be Black citizens of this world and in this world. Because if you don't prepare your children, then you are not doing them a service.
Yes.
So we live in this dichotomy. We want our kids to be kids for as long as they can be, keep them innocent. They shouldn't have to worry about adult things. But we also know that if we don't talk to our kids and have these very real conversations about what it means to be a young Black king, about what it means to hold your head high as a young Black queen, then we're not doing our jobs. And we have to talk about what it looks like if you get caught up in the crosshairs of a police interaction. And so we live and move in this world in a way that is truly unlike how other people have to raise their children. And it's unfortunate and it is not fair, but it's something we have to do. Bruce talked about training the kids for prison. This is why we have that entire phrase of school to prison pipeline. Years back, though, I said, this is actually preschool to prison pipeline, because if you look at the numbers of our kids in preschool, Black children are kicked out of preschool at higher rates than their white counterparts. This is starting at the age of 4, where they're conditioning our children to be placed in a locked cage. And so we don't really have the luxury of just saying, go out here and play. We have got to prepare them. And this is something that I want to actually cure. I don't want that to be the case in 2 generations. I don't want my grandchildren to have to think about this for their kids. How do we get to a place where Black children can just be Black children, that they're not looked at as something to fear, that they're not having to be sat on their father's lap and told, son, one day this is going to happen and this is how you survive that. And this is why, as Black people, we really have to come together, because our situation is a very, very unique one. We were stolen, kidnapped, and brought here to build a country that now tells us is not our home. The stuff that we're hearing, go back to Africa. Well, honey, if I knew exactly where you took me from, I probably would have been a queen over there. But now that I've been here and I've made you the superpower that you are, I have every right to be and continue to be here. But this is the world that we live in America. So as I'm thinking about us as the people, I just want to tell the listeners and the viewers that we have to remind ourselves constantly that we are the people, that all these folks that we see in Congress or our state legislature, or even on our city councils and our board of supervisors for the county, we are the people. They are our representatives. They are supposed to represent what we are asking for. They represent our needs, our voices. So when we talk about the power being in the people, that's just it. The people have the power. And so I never underestimate the power of the people. We see Cori Bush out there. She's getting it done. And if they cannot gather up themselves and have enough strength and courage to get done what we need to get done in Washington, then we have the power of recalling them back and putting in someone else who's going to get the job done. Because right now, what we're seeing is a lot of people making excuses, political excuses, and saying, well, I need bipartisan support, or I need this person to come with me. No, you need to do what the people who elected you to do. You just need to make sure it gets done. We elected you for a reason. And the reason why you're there is to make sure that you accomplish what the vision is for the people. And so if they can't do it, then we, the people, need to figure it out again. And that's just the end of it. And we, the people, are not the insurrectionists. We, the people, are not the people who want to crumble and hamper our democracy. We, the people, are not the people who want to destroy our government. We, the people, recognize that it's us who built this thing. It's us who is going to ensure that it endures, but that it has to be accessible to everyone. It has to be fair for everyone, and that everyone needs a seat at the table. And the only people who can ensure that that happens is us.
I'm gonna have to go to the gym after this. Well, I can't thank you enough personally. I know Paulie feels the same way, for coming onto this thing with us, sharing your truths, your vision, your fortitude, in doing something so influential for people that look like us. It's amazing. I have more respect for you than I have for people that do what I do. Just in general, it takes a whole different dedication. It takes a whole nother schooling system. It takes a whole nother vision for you to do what you do and be proud of what you do. And, you know, you're one of few successful people that aren't ashamed of who they look like, or how they look, or how they, whatever it is. And this is why we do what we do. And I, again, thank you so much. It's always a blessing to talk to you, because me and you could talk for 9 hours and never get tired. And just, it's an absolute honor. Absolute honor.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for being a backstop in your own perspective field. Also, just speaking in your truth and doing it unapologetically. Truly an inspiration to see how action-based you are. I've taken note on the fact that you said, hey, we can not only talk about these things, but you know, we have to be action-based in everything that we talk about. And that's the only way things are going to change. I often feel sometimes that talking about it is what arises these issues, and then also what arises people to start to act upon it. But like you said, like Cori Bush, you have to do and set that example. And you are a prime example of that. I want to thank you so much for coming on the backstop. We would love to have you again. You spoke so many gems for the people, and we love to push it forward. So again, everybody, the folks, thank you. I'm Paulie Jackson.
I'm Bruce Maxwell.
And thank you guys for watching the backstop.